Welcome to Drowsy Stories, a place where history unfolds at an unhurried pace, accompanied by calm, low-light visuals that spare your eyes and invite reflection. Tonight, we journey far across the forests and open grasslands of Eastern Europe to Imperial Russia realm of snowbound distances, gilded palaces, and, for most, hard-won survival. For the next 2 hours we will trace a single winter's day as it brushes against every layer of society, from the rough-hewn doorway of a serf's log cabin to the granite quays of St. Petersburg. Along the way you will feel the bite of the steppe wind, catch the faint aroma of rye bread and birch smoke, and overhear the quiet hum of Orthodox prayers. Without haste, we will uncover why even one ordinary day in this world could prove almost impossible for a modern traveler to endure. Take a slow breath and picture the eastern horizon paling toward dawn. A thin moon lingers, frost whispers across empty fields, and somewhere a cock crows hoarsely inside its wicker coop. Our first step is through a crooked doorway into darkness that smells of damp straw and wood smoke. The izbayor shelter for the night is a squat rectangle of pine logs notched together like rough puzzle pieces. During daylight, its exterior is silvered by decades of wind-driven sand. Now, before sunrise, the whole structure feels more like a burrow than a house. Inside, the air is heavy, with yesterday's cabbage soup, animal musk, and the sweet resin that seeps eternally from the timbers. You lie on the palati, a broad wooden shelf set high above the clay oven. Heat from slowly cooling bricks rises in gentle waves, but your breath still fogs in the lantern glow. A woolen caftan scratchy and threaded with repaired seam-scovers, shoulders grown stiff in the night. Beneath, a mattress of rye straw crackles whenever you shift, fragrant yet uneven, each stalk a tiny reminder of last summer's harvest. Below the sleeping platform, shapes emerge. A rough table, its surface polished by elbows and candle drips. A cradle fashioned from bent willow, and, stretched along the stove's flanks, 2 red and white pigs snuffling in their sleep. The animals share body heat with the family. Their faint grunts mingle with human sighs in the half-dark. No one wastes fuel on a separate barn this deep into winter. A dull clank, and the cabin's low door swings inward. A tall silhouette Sergei, head of household, stoops beneath the lintel, an armful of birch logs balanced on his hip. Frost dust shakes from his beard as he nudges the iron stove door with a felt-booted foot. The first log catches with a muffled pop. Light flares along the hand, hewn beams, revealing smoked icons tucked beneath the eaves. St. Nicholas in tarnished silver, the Virgin painted in fading egg tempera, a sprig of dried wormwood pinned like a talisman against cough or witchcraft. You lower yourself from the palati by a ladder shiny with wear. The plank floor feels bitterly cold bare boards over packed earth, so you move quickly, feet seeking the faded rush mat near the hearth. Sergei hands you a small tin cup of kvass, its tang of fermented rye both sharp and comforting. Outside, somewhere beyond the shutter, a dog begins a throaty bark that tapers into silence. The izba's single window remains shuttered, but through its chinks pale blue morning presses in. Sergei's wife, Darya, stirs chopped onions into a pot of steaming kashabak wheat porridge, flecked with coarse salt. The aroma drifts upward, savory and simple. Granules hiss where they meet the pot's blackened rim. She hums a lullaby older than memory, though the youngest child now stands nearly to her waist. Tradition lingers in small rituals long after necessity fades. As the household eats by stovelight, conversation turns to the village mirth peasant commune. Today the elders will redistribute strips of communal land, making sure each family bears an equal share of sandy soil and marshy clay. Sergei worries aloud about the new western strip. Too close to the oak grove, the wolves prowl there. Still, he must accept the allotment or petition the starosta. a task as delicate as threading an icy needle. Belly modestly warm, you step outside at last. Night has edged away, leaving a smear of pastel rose above the horizon. Frost crusts every blade of winter grass. Each step sounds like the crackle of thin glass. A mile distant, the steppe stretches to a chalky rim of trees-no fences, only the faint undulation of snowdrifts marking field boundaries decided in town records, kept hundreds of versts away. To the east, smoke columns trickle from other izbas, thin as spider silk in the still air. Somewhere, a bell in the wooden church tower chimes a slow, resonant note once, then twice, calling the faithful to matins. The sound drifts across frosted fields, muffled by distance, yet unmistakable. Villagers cross themselves, faces half hidden behind wool scarves, then trudge toward the chapel lantern glow. Sergei shoulders a two-handed axe whose handle bears the smooth patina of generations. Today's task, fell enough birch to patch a leaking roof and trade surplus logs to the landlord's steward for lamp oil. With each swing, the axe head bites deep, emitting a hollow thunk that ripples through the silent morning. Chips fly, pale as parchment. Sap, half frozen, glints like crystal along the exposed heartwood. Between strokes, you observe the land's frigid splendor, snow dusting distant hayricks like confectioner's sugar, a lone raven tracing lazy spirals against a bleached sky, and far off, the rising sun smoldering behind a curtain of pearl-gray cloud. Beauty here is vast yet indifferent, a canvas that offers no warmth in exchange for admiration. By mid-morning, a raw wind steals across the steppe. It threads effortlessly through every gap in your homespun coat, gnaws at fingertips, and stings eyes until tears freeze against your lashes. Sergei's cheeks redden, lips chapped to dull purple, but the axe continues its measured rhythm. There is no choice. The landlord's timber quota must be met, or fines payable and grain will follow. Pausing, Sergei leans on the haft and surveys the felled trunks, counting under his breath. He nods. Enough, perhaps. You help stack the birch, each log exhaling a faint, sweet, sharp scent, hint of the fire it will one day feed. The sled awaits soaked runners bound in iron, horse blanketed against the cold. Harness creaks. The animal's breath rises in twin plumes like miniature storm clouds. Returning to the village, sky alabaster with encroaching snow, you notice fresh footprints, a bailiff's unmistakable heel drag pattern. He has come from the manor to post a decree, visible now on the chapel Doran edict, demanding extra fodder deliveries to the estate stables. A collective groan passes among the gathering serfs, but resistance is unthinkable. The Tsar's will, however remote, speaks through such scraps of parchment. The first flakes begin to drift, turning the air into a slow-moving curtain. You shake snow from your cap while Sergei folds the new obligation into his coat. The day presses forward chores, quotas, prayer seat step layered like frost upon frost. Already, you feel fatigue gathering in shoulders and spine, a weight as persistent as the winter sky. Yet, this is only the dawn of a single day. Ahead lie communal duties, scarce meals, and the steady reach of Imperial authority. As the sled skids toward the landlord's granary, sleigh bells chiming in the hush, our focus shifts from individual hardship to the larger web that binds every peasant family within the mere. The sleigh's bells fade behind you as we turn to the quiet heart of village life. The myrrh, that intricate tapestry of custom, obligation, and shared endurance that governs every furrow of soil and every hour of labor. Imagine the mere as a living ring of interlocking hands. Step inside the circle now. Listen to its steady, deliberate pulse. At the village center stands a broad, packed earth square. Wooden benches hug the walls of low plank buildings, the granary, the smithy, the starosta's modest office. Frost clings to every nailhead, sparkling when a shy ray of sunlight breaks through pale cloud. Bundled figures gather here in the muted dawn, breath pluming in tones of pearl. They speak little. A nod, a murmured "Dobre jutro" suffices. Yet under those cuffed sleeves and patched lapels flows a current of calculation. Who will receive which strip of rye field this season? Whose cow limps after last week's ice? Which family must supply extra men to mend the landlord's dam? On a raised platform, a mere plank laid atop oak stumps, the starosta clears his throat. His beard, stiff with frost, juts like gray straw from beneath a felt cap. At his side rests the kniaz's steward, cloak trimmed in fox, parchment roll unfurled and sealed with an amber-hued blob of wax. One document records land allotments, another tallies arrears and tax, a third lists households providing sons to the conscription pool next month. Though written by the steward's neat clerical hand, the lists are weighed, debated, accepted or occasionally protested in the rough, resonant cadence of village Russian. The Mir owns the land, collectively yet parcels it anew each season, ensuring that no family is doomed to the marsh edge forever, and none grows complacent on the richest black loam. Picture a grand chessboard of soil, long, slender strips, each no wider than a cart's turning radius, stretching into the snowy haze. Today, Sergei draws a straw, etched with two black notches symbol of the southern quadrant beside the willow-lined stream. Good for barley, poor for buckwheat. It balances last year's sandy western lot. Families calculate in hushed tones. How many sheaves might the strip yield? Will the stream flood as it did in spring '61? Meanwhile, the steward records each assignment with an iron stylet that scratches softly upon parchment, a noise like a beetle nibbling dry bark. That faint scratch decides how much bread a widow will taste next winter, how many taxes a struggling household can meet, whether a dowry can include not only a woven towel but perhaps a young ewe. Obligations pile like cordwood. Beyond working their own strips, peasants owe barshkinades of unpaid labor on the landlord's domain. The Mir allocates these tasks too, spreading burden as evenly as snowfall on a level roof. Tuesday and Thursday this week are corvée days. Sergei and two neighbors will cart timber to the manor and repair a fish pond sluice. Others will thresh rye in the landlord's barn or weave flax into sailcloth destined for faraway Baltic ports. In the pre-dawn stillness of a corvée morning, iron-bound wagon wheels groan across frozen ruts. A crescent moon hovers low, staining the horizon with sickle-thin silver. Lanterns hiss, fueled by rendered tallow. Their halos barely pierce the enveloping gloom. Within each lantern's glow, wisps of hay swirl beneath the wagon seats, faint reminder of summer's sunlit scent lost under layers of ice. Should a peasant falter or arrive late, deliver timber short by a single log penalties follow with unfailing certainty. A monetary fine, perhaps, paid in kopecks arduously saved, or forfeiture of a lamb come spring, or an extra week of corvée stacked atop an already exhausting calendar. Even small infractions ripple outward. A missing lamb weakens next year's wool allotment, shortens the blanket on a child's cot, thins the insulation against a murderous February gale. The Mir itself enforces many of these penalties. In the evening, after tasks conclude, villagers convene in the same courtyard. Torches sputter in iron sconces, their resinous smoke curling skyward. The starosta reads the steward's notes. Voices rise firm but rarely loud, for open conflict breaks the fragile harmony on which all depend. Instead, dissent is expressed in narrowed eyes, in a pause before assent, in the way one man's boot scuffs frost while he weighs the fairness of a judgment. Yet the mirror is not only a net of obligations, it is also a shield. When Sergei's neighbor Pyotr fell ill last autumn with lung fever, the commune dispatched young lads to harvest his late potatoes, mothers to keep his hearth burning, a young girl to mind goats that bleated restlessly in an empty byre. In return, Pyotr's family relinquished next year's claim on a fertile meadow, but more than barter passed, an unspoken promise that no household stands utterly alone beneath the Tsar's distant gaze. On certain nights, after the final church bell tolls and frost crystals sparkle like stray embers, women gather in a warm izba to spin flax. Wheels hum in meditative rhythm while lips share folk remedies and rumors new taxes on salt, an edict restricting forest foraging. Children, lulled by the drone of wheel and tail, drowse beside the oven, cheeks flushed, dreams filled with galloping troika sleighs and St. George's armored grace. Not all tensions resolve quietly. One bitter spring, two families clashed over elm saplings claimed for fence posts. Axes stayed sheathed, but words cut deep. The Mir convened a Shkoda formal assembly. Under leaden skies spitting wet snow, elders perched on cut stumps arranged in a ragged circle. Each disputant spoke in turn, voice measured, hands trembling more from indignation than cold. After hours, a verdict. Both would surrender the contested saplings. Each would plant 3 young elms by the roadside and share watch until they rooted. Thus punishment became communal investment, grievance transformed into living boundary. Hover now above this humble square and trace an invisible thread stretching hundreds of versts to St. Petersburg. There, in candlelit ministry offices, clerks copy population tallies, grain yields, tax arrears reports compiled from thousands of communes like this one. Data travels upward, edicts flow downward. Yet between decree and village, vast distances and harsher seasons intervene, granting the mere space to interpret, negotiate, occasionally delay. Within that slim margin, peasants grasp fragments of autonomia, sliver of night sky glimpsed between oppressive clouds. As afternoon light thins, Sergei guides a wooden plowshare to his newly allotted strip. Snow has crusted but not yet frozen the soil beneath. Each pass carves neat furrows of darker earth edged in white, like stripes on a sable pelt. Across the field, others mirror the motion until the meadow resembles a colossal comb's patient work. Smoke rises from remote chimneys, curling indigo against a peach-colored horizon. The air smells of turned loam, pine resin, distant fire scent, older than parchment laws, and deeper than any czar's decree. When the last furrow is drawn, Sergei wipes the wooden yoke, pats the shaggy pony's neck, and turns homeward. Night descends swiftly. The single avenue of trampled snow between huts shimmers under a cold, waxing moon. Within each izba doorframe hangs a sprig of dried rowan berries ward against misfortune. The berries wrinkle but remain crimson, brave punctuation in a world painted mostly in muted grays and browns. Inside, Daria ladles beet-tinged soup into clay bowls. Children clasp the warm vessels like tiny stoves, inhaling steam scented faintly with dill. Sergei recites a blessing simple, ancient words, and the family eats in steady silence, wooden spoons tapping bowls in even tempo. Outside, the Mir rests. Chores finished, disputes hushed, frozen fields awaiting the slow promise of spring. The communal bond that ties each soul to land and labor is as uncompromising as winter itself. Yet within that bond pulses a measured solidarity enough, perhaps, to see another day through. The village lanterns dim, and the hush that follows supper sharpens your senses. Outside the izba, a brittle crust squeaks underfoot. Overhead the sky glitters, cold and aloof. Step back indoors a moment. The embers glow steady, and on a low shelf beside the stove sits a round, domed loaf of ridance, nearly black, its crust dusted in ashen flour. In Imperial Russia, this loaf is far more than food. It is timetable, superstition, and silent chronicle of the seasons. Rye sown in last year's chill now dreams beneath snow, but the loaf before you began its journey 14 months ago in an autumn field turned by dull iron. All winter the grain lay dormant, snowpack shielding it from murderous winds. Spring thaw coaxed pale shoots, summer sun darkened heads to dusky gold. August saw sickles whisper through swaying ranks. Sheaves dried on tripods called kopitsi, then rode creaking carts to a threshing floor of packed clay, where flails rose and fell in slow rhythm. Within the granary, grain slept again, waiting not for appetite, but for the priest's blessing on harvest home. Only after the first frost would Darya carry a burlap sack to the communal mill. There, a water wheel groaned against half-frozen sluice gates, grinding rye berries to coarse meal fragrant with earthy sweetness. Back in the izba, she kneaded dough with brine, a dash of fermented starter saved from yesterday's loaf, and a pinch of ground caraway if fortune allowed. The dense ball proofed overnight in a wooden trough warmed by the oven's side. Dawn found it slid onto birch leaves laid atop blistering bricks. Now, in deep winter, that bread is rationed with almanac precision. Sergei slices it thin, scarcely thicker than a hiding mouse's ear. 1 piece per child, 2 for adults who face the frost at dawn. The crust crackles faintly, revealing a moist, crumb-tinted umber, flecked with unmilled husk. Each bite tastes of smoke, salt, and the faint memory of midsummer wind rippling over rye. Alongside the bread stands a pitcher of kvass. It is murky amber, fermented from crusts that could not be spared for the table. Stale slices, boiled, cooled, sweetened modestly with beet sugar, then left beneath a cloth for 2 nights until yeasts awoke. The resulting drink fizzes softly, hardly stronger than a modern soda, yet rich in B vitamins the family cannot name. Children drink it instead of water-boiled, water challenges scarce firewood, and wells risk spring runoff taint. After bread and kvass, the winter pantry offers what Russian proverb calls poor but honest fare. Clay crocks hold shchizar, cabbage soup enriched, on feast days, with a trace of pork fat gone cloudy with chill. Net bags cradle-wizened turnips, their skins thin as parchment, sweetness concentrating as flesh dries. A small barrel of salted cucumbers sits beneath the stove's warm flank. When its brine turns cloudy, Sergei skims the surface, mutters a prayer, and hopes they last another month. Beyond these staples, little remains. Apples shriveled by frost became cider weeks ago. Fresh milk vanished when the family cow went dry. Darya's herb braid of dill and tansy still scents the rafters, but can no longer mask the thinness of soup. Even for Russian peasants accustomed to scarcity, February and March are the hungry weeks a corridor of want between dwindling stores and first nettle greens of spring. What you taste in each rationed slice is not merely the climate, but the state. The landlord's steward claims a fixed share of grain before winter begins. From the remainder, Sergei owes Obrokrent and Kintu district coffers. Then the church collects a tithe. Only after these levies does the family mark how many loaves the bin might yield, how many handfuls must be ground fine for infants, coarse for adults, and whether any may be saved as seed. During good harvests, say, the abundant summer of 1,867 levies leave enough to ward off hunger. But affairs of empire seldom pause for weather. In 1,891, when rains drowned the Volga grain belt and frost-blackened seedlings, Bureaucrats still filled rail cars bound for St. Petersburg and export harbors. In the village bin, the rye dwindled week by week until she became hot water over cabbage leaves, and Cavis lost its fizz for want of crusts. No trumpet announces famine. It steals quietly. First vanish the root vegetables that winter poorly. Next go the chickens, traded for grain at steep discount. Then hides the cat, sensing danger. Bread, once sliced, is now weighed. Sergei's youngest develops the telltale sandpaper cough of scurvy. Daria wets sawdust, mixes it with rye peelings, and bakes puck-hard biscuits to deaden the gnawing. In the worst years 1833, 1840, 1873, and that grim 1891 village elders petition the district capital. Relief grain may arrive, moldy but edible, its bags marked with the double-headed eagle, or it may divert to towns along the way, siphoned by corrupt officials. The mere adapts. Hunting teams stalk lean hares, berry gatherers rake last year's lingon under snow, children scrape lichen from pines and simmer it into gelatinous porridge. Death visits not with spectacle, but with the thinning of cheeks, the dimming of eyes, the faint clatter of a wooden spoon against an empty bowl. Amid this attrition, the church calendar prescribes over 200 days of fasting each year, no meat, few dairy products. What seems cruel becomes, paradoxically, survival training. Generations have learned to live on kasha and mushrooms, to flavor absence with garlic and dill. When Easter finally breaks the longest fast, the rich aroma of roast goose fills the izba like sunlight after a tunnel. Icons bear witness. On the northern wall, candlelight flickers across Christ Pantocrator's solemn gaze, while the family shares a cider-soaked raisin bun baked from precious white flour. The loaf is cross-scored before baking, each quadrant destined for a relative, neighbor, or beggar. Even in plenty, perhaps especially, then generosity is a hedge against future want, for famine is no stranger and seldom travels alone. Lift now to a higher vantage. Horse-drawn sleds and, later, iron locomotives carry grain across empire, tea caravans from China wind toward Moscow. Yet, in many provinces, the distribution lattice resembles lace beautiful, intricate, riddled with holes. A blizzard along one rail spur, a swollen tributary washing out a bridge, can cut villages off for weeks. Sergei could walk 10 miles to the nearest station, watch wagons unload crates of oranges and sacks of sugar for urban shops, and return home with neither, his kopecks pledged already to seed and salt. Salt, too, bears tax. Its price decides how much cabbage can be preserved, how long butter keeps, whether pork rashers turn safely into bacon or rot in summer heat. Thus, an imperial excise carved into law echoes months later each time Daria sprinkles brine over shredded leaves. Even when cupboards refill, famine leaves fingerprints. Adults chew slowly, wary of memory's echo. Weddings feature obligatory alms for the poor, lest prosperity provoke envy from the unseen. Nursery rhymes warn children against wasting crumbs. And in the prayer for the Tsar, recited each Sunday, parishioners linger a heartbeat longer on the plea for abundant harvests, words spoken with the gravity of lived experience. Night deepens. Bread is wrapped in linen and stowed, kvass jug capped against inquisitive mice. Sergei seals the stove flue. The last orange glow dims to a faint scarlet trace. As the izba drifts into sleep, ponder the unseen architecture above, ministries counting bushels, treasuries setting salt tariffs, an autocrat signing grain export contracts on gilt-edged parchment. Their decisions reach even the smallest wooden spoon in this cabin. The candle atop Sergei's grain ledger has burned low, yet its glow still flickers across neat columns of figures, a quiet reminder that numbers quantities of rye, kopecks of salt tax, years owed in service-governed life, as surely as sunrise and snow. Slip, for a moment, on a weightless current of thought, and drift northwest, over tangled forests and frozen rivers, until domes and granite embankments rise beneath you. Here stands St. Petersburg, cradle of decrees that ripple across half of Eurasia, touching every wooden spoon in every village hearth. Imagine entering the Ministry of State Domains on a muted January morning. Coal smoke softens the pale, wintry sun. Neva ice groans beneath a dusting of new snow. Inside, waxed parquet floors gleam like still water, reflecting tall windows rimmed with frost lace. Clerks in dark wool uniforms move quietly between high desks, the hush broken only by the whisper of goose-quill pens and the faint rustle of vellum. One scribe pauses to warm an ink bottle over a small spirit lamp, the scent of alcohol dissolving into the cold air. Stacked along one wall are bound folios labeled in measured Cyrillic, Voronezh timber quotas, Vologda salt assessments, Saratov draft levies. A courier opens the brass latch on a leather post case. Inside lie rolled ukases sealed with red wax, stamped by a double-headed eagle. By evening, these scrolls will begin the long journey southward, tucked beneath great coated arms aboard a troika or shunted to a distant rail car bound for the Volga line. Farther along the quay, within the vast winter palace, a lantern's glow lingers behind brocade curtains. The Tsar, whether Alexander, Nicholas, or another in the Romanov linolines over polished mahogany, quill poised. He signs in leisurely strokes, "By the grace of God, we, Emperor and autocrat of all the Russias." The ink, a deep lake of iron gall, dries to bluish black. Grains of sand absorb any excess gloss. Outside, sentries stamp felt boots against the cold, unaware that a single flourish of imperial script will raise new tariffs on grain and reshape Sergei's next harvest ration hundreds of versts away. The air in the study carries a faint scent of beeswax, leather bindings, and freshly extinguished candlewick. Thick carpets hush every footstep, but beyond the palace gates, hoofbeats echo on frozen cobblestones official messengers ready to bear edicts toward far-flung provinces dwarfed by distance. Edicts seldom travel alone. They are accompanied by tables, schedules, and explanatory circulars drafted in ministries whose names stretch as long as a midwinter shadow: the Department for Confessional Affairs, the Board of Guardians for Roads and Inns, the third section of His Imperial Majesty's Chancellery. Each office adds penciled marginalia, adjusts a numeral, inserts a cautionary phrase. The finished packet resembles a sheaf of winter reeds, slender, brittle, and numerous. Together they leave the capital like migrating birds, winging toward provincial governors in stone mansions ringed by dormant lilac bushes. In Kazan, a governor in fur-lined uniform breaks the red seal, notes the quota for army recruits, and passes the order down a level to district marshals of nobility. By the time the parchment reaches the village starosta, weeks have blurred the ink and mottled the margins with melting snow. Yet the figures remain legible. 4 conscripts this year, 10 additional desiatinas of birch for naval shipyards, 2 kopecks more in salt duty per adult soul. Slide into Sergei's pocket as he unfolds his internal passporta's single-folded sheet of coarse paper stamped with official ink the color of midnight water. It lists his name, patronymic, age, hair, the hue of dark rye, and the phrase, "of the estate of serfs." Without this passport, he may not travel beyond a 30-verst radius, no market town, no pilgrimage, no search for day work in a factory. When the rural policeman checks documents at a river crossing, he compares the written description with Sergei's wind-reddened face A mismatch invites detention. A lost stamp means the long walk home under guard. Such small papers turn the vast Russian plain into an invisible maze of checkpoints, each gate latched by the Tsar's invisible hand. The flow of authority is not strictly one way. From villages rise petition scraps of birch bark once, then sheets of lined blue paper bearing careful lines written by the literate nephew of a priest or the schoolteacher's daughter. They recount hail that shattered flax, wolves that harried cattle, a bailiff who exacts more than law allows. Bundled with a modest bribia wedge of beeswax, a twist of shag tobaccothes, pleas ascend through district offices, maybe reaching a ministry clerk who annotates in cramped script, under consideraciono funds. Some petitions collect dust, others prompt an inspection. A rare few catch the sovereign's eye during an audience and earn a faint penciled "granted." Months later, Sergei may receive a folded note forgiving 1/3 of arrears. He will unfold it on the same bench where bread is sliced, trace the faint crest with a calloused thumb, and breathe a little easier until another decree arrives. Turn now toward law and order. In provincial towns, uniformed gendarmes stand watch beneath gas lamps that sputter in sleet. Their cloak pins gleam with gilt eagles, yet in pockets they carry plain notebooks ruled for reports. A new song mocking the salt tax, a stranger seen copying church sermons. Within the capital, clerks of the third section read such notes by midnight lamplight, underlining surnames in brown ink. An order for surveillance may follow, or for intellectuals too curious, a warrant for exile sealed with quick wax. Exile seldom roars, it whispers. A knock before dawn, a sled harnessed while neighbors sleep, a parting glance at chimneys still dreaming smoke. 2 weeks later, that name appears penciled in a register at Tobolsk or Irkutsk, alongside a brief remark, political unreliable, minor incendiary verse. East of the Urals, snow erases footsteps with efficient grace. While secret police trace invisible lines, the Imperial Army etches very real ones. Conscription lists drawn up in ministries travel the same postal roads, bearing numbers that translate to sons absent from field and hearth for 25 years. Somewhere en route, an official adds a flourish extend furloughs in famine districts. By 1 month yet, the underlying arithmetic persists. Sergei's eldest may draw the fatal lot, trading birch forests for Caucasian garrisons, accordion music in candlelit barracks for rifle drill beneath scorching steppe sun. Behind each uniform stand tailors, teamsters, farriers. Behind each musket, accounts ledgers itemizing rubles spent on powder, kopecks on ramrods. In St. Petersburg, quartermasters compare columns of sums with the neatness of gardeners inspecting flower beds. They note how many sacks of Urals iron turn into Ulan lances, how much Kyrgyz horsehair stuffs artillery saddles. From palaces to smithies, the Tsar's will is a thread stitching disparate crafts into a vast, unseen fabric. On a spring night near Easter, icons flicker beneath lavender beeswax candles in the palace chapel. The Tsar stands among courtiers, head bowed beneath frescoed vaults. Chant rises, incense drifts, like morning mist on a river. For a single hour the autocrat seems part of a congregation rather than master of it. Yet even here, authority lingers. The priest's vestments carry donor plaques with imperial initials, and the gospel's silver cover gleams with the royal cipher. Miles away, the same gospel passage is read in Sergei's wooden church, though the priest's stole is mended with flax thread, and candles are tallow instead of beeswax. Still, the words match echoes of power reaching through shared ritual. Power in Imperial Russia seldom arrives as crashing drums. More often, it manifests like a steady snowfall, silent, persistent, reshaping the landscape grain by grain. a revised salt tariff, a conscription edict, a clerk's margin note on timber yields. They settle upon the village roof until weight and cold become indistinguishable. And yet, within every izba spark and within every ministry lamp, human intention flickers, sometimes compassionate, sometimes self-serving, often simply dutiful. The great machine of empire turns on countless tiny cogs, a steward who spares a widow the late fee, a courier who braves blizzard, snarled roads, a scribe who dots an I with deliberate care. Their quiet acts, unremarkable alone, modulate the force of distant commands. Snow continues its gentle descent outside the ministry windows and the izba shutters alike, blanketing both parchment and rye stubble in equal hush. Night tightens its hold, temperature dips, frost feathers creep across glass. A hush settles over the steppe, so complete that even the frost seems to listen. In Imperial Russia, winter is not merely a season. It is an elemental presence unyielding, patient, and infinitely resourceful at testing the limits of human resolve. Let us walk into that breath-stealing stillness and feel how people, animals, and dwellings bend though rarely break beneath its weight. October's amber leaves have scarcely finished swirling when a thin film of ice forms along river shallows. At first it resembles blown glass fragile, almost playful. But within nights the ice thickens, spreading upstream like spilled ink until barges must moor early and fishermen haul their nets ashore, folding them like tired wings. A scent of iron creeps into the air, metallic and dry. It prickles nostrils and lingers on tongue and lip. Inside Sergei's izba, preparations unfold in deliberate layers. First comes the rubaka, a linen undershirt laundered last summer in river water scented faintly with soapwort. Over it, woolen trousers rough as thistle. Then the kaftan thick fulled cloth dyed a muted brown, patched at elbows with darker squares that tell of winters past. A wide leather belt cinches warmth against spine and ribs. Yet, cloth alone is no match for a January gale. Sergei kneels before a low chest and unrolls a fur-lined telegrika. The sheepskin still carries a trace of the hillside from which it came. Lanolin's sweet, grass smoke subtle as memory. A hood trimmed with fox frames cheeks soon to redden. Lastly, he wrenches on Valenka felt boots, seamless, inscrutable, able to wick moisture and insulate even at 30 degrees below. Daria dresses the children in miniature echoes, quilted jackets stuffed with carded flax, mittens knitted from goat down, scarves wound high enough to meet the wool cap's brims. Only dark, curious eyes remain exposed, shining like onyx in a landscape of white. An izba endures winter much like the families inside by conserving every possible heat-borne whisper. Its walls, double-layered pine chinked with moss, hold warmth surprisingly well once the great clay stove is fired. All day the oven mouth devours split birch. By dusk the bricks glow, dull, crimson, radiating upwards so the sleeping platform becomes a summer terrace suspended in frost. On the stove shelf, dough rises, herbs dry, kittens sprawl, and elderly grandmothers dose aching joints with gentle heat. Windows are shuttered with thick boards at night. Where glass exists, it is bubbled and ripples like pond water caught mid-current. Or frost feathers each pane into delicate ferns that, come morning, melt and trickle down frames like silent tears. These rivulets are quickly caught with rags lest they freeze again and warp the sill. Outside, movement follows the dictates of snowpack. When drifts climb taller than a cartwheel, the world's geometry changes. Village fences vanish beneath waves of white. Familiar lanes migrate to the crowns of frozen rivers that now serve as glistening highways. Sleigh runners, greased with tallow and beeswax, hiss across the surface like arrow feathers. Bells fastened to the shafts announce the troika's passage, a crystalline jangling that echoes through stands of silver birch and fades into blue dusk. Horses breathe steam and wear, felt blankets strapped beneath harness leather to keep sweat from chilling. Sergei rubs their muzzles with hay chaff to dislodge icy whiskers. A small canvas bag of oats dangles from each bridle. Grain must be fed little and often, lest stomachs founder in the cold. Daylight shrinks until noon feels like twilight. Sunrise paints the horizon with a thin apricot smear just after 8, only to retreat behind purple cloud by 3. Villagers tally chores by lamp hours rather than sun angles. Mend harness for 1 tallow dip, shell peas for half an oil wick. Read evening psalms while the last cedar splinter burns. Candles themselves become currant sisum molded from mutton fat, smoky and pungent. Others fine beeswax saved for feast days, emitting a honeyed glow that softens every shadow. Step outdoors mid-January. Exhale. Breath condenses with a soft puff, hangs suspended, then drifts away like pale silk. The air is so cold it rings. Wooden gates creak with a pitch higher than in summer. Frozen iron acquires a brittle timbre under striking hammers, and distant ravens call in voices that sound strangely muffled, as if the very atmosphere thickens and damps vibration. Children can amuse themselves by tossing ladles of boiling water skyward, where it flashes to mist before the droplets land a brief blossoming cloud that vanishes with a hiss. Yet they know not to touch metal bare-handed. A single forgetful grasp can strip skin, leaving a wheel that throbs until spring. At the village edge stands a store's night watchman huddled in a fur cloak, tall as he is wide. Each hour he strikes a suspended rail with a mallet. 5 reverberations for 11 o'clock, 4 for midnight, and so on until dawn. The resonant clang slides across snowfields and rebounds from timber walls, reminding bears and bandits alike that the settlement wakes, if only lightly. Indoors, moisture freezes on nails driven through rafters, forming stalactites that drip faintly near the stove's heat. Darya lays felt pads on bench seats before visitors arrive, ensuring they do not chill through the hips. Infants, swaddled in lambskin, bear snug openings for arms. Mittens are stitched directly onto sleeves so tiny hands never greet raw air unguarded. When chores oblige a trek through driving snow, villagers carry jalnik small birch bark canisters of glowing charcoal borrowed from the hearth, tucked inside fur gauntlets to warm numbing fingers. For longer journeys, travelers wedge heated stones, wrapped in flax, beneath sleigh blankets. Rest stops are spaced by what the stones remember of fire. On clear nights the heavens blaze with such fierce brilliance that even hardened skeptics feel their pulse quicken. Roman-lined constellations shimmer above onion domes rimed with ice. Inside wooden churches, candles flicker before jewel-bright icons, each flame reflected 100 times in painted halos and gilt frames. Priests chant litanies older than dynasties, their breath emerging in pale ribbons that drift upward to mingle with incense. The building creaks in protest, timbers contracting under the cold, yet faith fills the seams where warmth escapes. It is easy to dwell on hardship, yet winter bestows subtle boons. Fish netted through ice holes stay fresh for days. Meat hangs safely beneath eaves, chilled to perfect firmness. Fur pelts cure without flies. Sleighs outrun carts on smooth frozen rivers, bringing distant kin within reach for Yuletide gatherings. Snow dampens footsteps, muffles quarrels, and reflects moonlight so generously that even the darkest night glows faint silver. As February wanes, sun-dogsed wind phantom suns flank the dawn, glittering through ice crystals adrift in steer-furrowed air. They herald change, but change comes glacially. Rivers crack with thunder, yet remain sealed. Sap stirs unseen in birch trunks. Crocks of sour cabbage dwindle ever slower. Endurance is practiced art, a slow-moving prayer uttered by each shovel of stove ash flung onto crusted drifts. By late afternoon, an icy wind springs up, rattling shutters and carrying the distant bray of a military bugle from the district town, a grim reminder that call-up day looms. Sergei's eldest polishes worn boots, adjusting ill-fitting straps with numb fingers. Tonight his dreams will stride beyond village limits, toward barracks and parade grounds lit by kerosene torches. And so, as winter clenches the land in iron grip, another force begins to pull able bodies outward, the Imperial Army's insistent summons. A thin, brassy bugle note glides over the frozen lane like a gull skimming a quiet sea. It lingers above the village roofs, then slips between chinks in Sergei's shutter, settling on every waking mind. The summons is not urgent. It is simply inevitable, another strand in the net that binds peasant lives to imperial will. Picture the commune yard at dawn. Snow crunches beneath felt boots as men gather in a somber semicircle. From a birchwood box, the starosta withdraws carved chips, 9 smooth, 1 nicked with a shallow V-shaped groove. Gloved hands pass the box along. Each man dips, feels, withdraws. A hush swells until the unlucky chip surfaces in Pyotr's broad palm, though it might easily have been Sergei's eldest, Ivan. Mother's exhales softly in mingled relief and guilt. Pyotr's wife squeezes his arm once, firmly, then turns away to hide the sudden shimmer in her eyes. The ritual ends quickly. A priest blesses a brass pectoral cross to hang around the conscript's neck. The steward records a name, a patronymic, a year of birth. Pyotr is promised a ruble and a half in travel money coin. He will likely send homeplus the Tsar's distant gratitude. In return, he will surrender up to 25 midwinter birthdays to barracks, drill grounds, and distant frontiers. 2 mornings later, sleigh runners hiss toward the district depot. Pyotr sits among 10 recruits on wooden benches padded with straw. Each shoulders a linen sack containing 1 change of homespun, a block of rye bread, and a letter of deliverance from all remaining corvée, cold comfort. As birch plantations blur past, the men pass a flask of peppered vodka. The drink burns, then radiates outward, softening the edges of fear. At the depot, an officer in ink-blue greatcoat oversees registration. He measures each recruit's height against a chalk line on barrack planks. Anything over 5'4" elicits a satisfied grunt. Beards are trimmed to regulation point beneath the chin. Shaggy hair falls in clumps to the sawdust floor. In place of wool caftans, the men receive heavy gray overcoats, brass-buttoned and red-piped. Uniforms carry the resin scent of fresh dye mingled with lamp-oilous smell that will cling to them longer than memory of rye fields. Snowflakes drift through the parade ground twilight, sparkling briefly in lantern beams. A sergeant's voice spee from years of pipe smoke counts, cadence in a low monotone. Raz, dva, tree, boots, thud in imperfect unison. The frozen earth answers with hollow percussion. Shoulders brace beneath unfamiliar straps. Hands ache around the smooth chill of a Berdan rifle. Pyotr's pulse finds a slow harmony with the measured march, strangely calming, like the tide he has never seen. Evening brings stew thick with barley, thin with beef, ladled into dented tin bowls. The mess hall resonates with the clink of spoons and muted chatter. Men from Baltic ports compare dialects with those from Astrakhan's steppe, discovering common ground in shared blisters and calloused palms. On a high shelf, an icon of St. George catches candlelight. The saint's lance gleams gold, forever poised above the dragon's coiled shadow. Wood-burning stoves glow red behind iron grills, but heat seldom reaches the far bunks. Pyotr lays wool cape over thin straw mattress, tucks greatcoat beneath feet, and drifts toward uneasy rest to the creak of settling timber and the whistle of wind through eaves. Somewhere along the row, A recruit murmurs a lullaby learned at his mother's hearth. Its simple cadence folds like an extra blanket over every listener. At dawn, trumpet signals rouse the company. Ash pails rattle down corridors. Uniform brass is polished with snow to a winter sheen. Cartridge boxes receive their first measured allotment of rounds gleaming cylinders that smell faintly of tallow and saltpeter. Winter releases its grip, and units destined for the Caucasus march south through slushy villages. Roads turn to sucking clay. Supply wagons groan. Boots grow heavy with mud. Yet the landscape blooms. Cherry orchards flare pink against snow. Patched hillsides. Skylarks stitch silver threads of song into the sky. For many soldiers, this is the first brush with foreign, fragrance wild thyme, almond blossom, distant sea salt riding warm currents. Camps rise at Riverbend and Mountain Pass. Tents billow like canvas clouds. Campfires pepper the dusk with sparks. Black bread gives way to coarse maize cakes. Samovars hiss, releasing curls of tea-scented steam. Letters travel homeward on the same postal routes that once ferried grain, quotas-thin sheets, smudged by rain, yet potent enough to summon mother's tears when read aloud beside the village stove. In narrow passes, ringed by scree and goat trail, columns sometimes meet resistance. Here we pause only long enough to acknowledge fear, chaos, the echo of rifle volleys, the acrid veil of burnt powder. Details blur, the narrative stays gentle. Know that not all return, and those who do carry the echo of musketry in their sleep yet time, routine, and the slow comfort of comradeship knit fissures no surgeon can stitch. After 6 years, a soldier may earn his first leave a fleeting month to step back through the izba door, metal like a small winter sun on his chest. He arrives taller of posture, leaner of limb, his Russian threaded with curious accents. Children eye his brass buttons, neighbors press for tales. But the furlough passes, the empire calls him back. If luck holds, after 25 years a silver-haired veteran returns for good, entitled to settle anywhere, exempt from taxes, granted the title state peasant. Few villages, however, can support another able stomach without an allotment of land. Many veterans drift to towns, finding work as watchmen, janitors, or when bones, perma-trailway porters. While Pyotr hefts pack and musket, his wife shoulders fresh duties, sowing, harvesting, arguing allocations before the mirror. Children mature quickly. The eldest may fill his father's place at corvée. The youngest learn to read so she can decipher the looping script of field post letters. Each month without news tightens a knot of worry, yet the family cultivates pride like hard-won rye proof that their lineage stands in service of the motherland. Should a notification letter come black wax, formal script grief unfolds in ritual, a memorial service beneath cedar, smoke, incense, a wooden cross planted in sandy soil, his name added to a modest wall tablet inside the church porch. In Sergei's village, 20 such names already blur beneath whitewash and candle soot, yet each remains a syllable in the commune's quiet litany of endurance. When campaigns lull and garrisons thin, some discharged soldiers ride river steamers north, seeking wages in factories along the Baltic shore. Their stories flow homeward with them, endless brick chimneys, clock whistles piercing street smog, lodging houses packed with 50 souls under one leaking roof. It is there, on granite quays and soot-streaked avenues, that we will next unfurl our tale into the restless arteries of St. Petersburg's granite facade. The steamer's paddle wheels slow with a muffled sigh, and a new horizon rises. Rows of pale green palaces, ribboned with white cornices, pressed shoulder to shoulder along a granite quay. From the quiet rhythms of village and barrack, we now enter the capital St. Petersburg where, frozen winds from the Gulf of Finland, meet the ceaseless murmur of human industry. Stand on deck as dawn lifts a pearl-gray veil from the Neva. Ice floes drift past like broken panes of smoky glass, bumping against stone embankments that gleam under a film of hoarfrost. Between them and the river, iron mooring rings glisten. Droplets freeze as they fall, forming tiny beads that glitter like beads on an unfinished rosary. Disembarking recruits, factory hands, and hopeful merchants clatter down a gangplank slick with rime. Boots meet pavement granite blocks, pitted by centuries of studded horseshoes. A constable in navy overcoat notes each arrival. His brass insignia catches first light, flashing once, then subsiding into shadow. The air is sharp with mingled scents. Coal smoke from a distant textile mill, brackish undertones of thawing river mud, and a faint sweetness of freshly baked wheat loaves luxury unknown on rye-bound steppes. Overhead, slate doves wheel between Baroque cornices, their wings sounding like the lazy turning of enormous book pages. A steam tram rattles along the quay, vents sighing. Its bell chimes a low warning, yet the sound is quickly swallowed by a deeper chorus. Carriage wheels on cobbles, labor chants from the Admiralty dockyard, and the distant whistle of the Baltic station announcing a freight train's departure toward Moscow. The city pulses never loudly, but persistently, like a great heart muffled beneath winter layers. Recruits turned laborers follow painted signboards to a yellow stucco building off Logovsky Prospect. A threadbare caretaker leads them up 5 flights of wood-worn stairs ending beneath a soot-black skylight. In a dormitory no wider than a village barn stand 4 rows of iron cots, straw mattresses sheathed in ticking cloth. The room smells of damp wool, kerosene, and last night's cabbage soup warming over an iron stove. Here, 12 men share a single wash basin. They queue at dawn, clattering enamel mugs beneath a spigot that trickles water the color of weak tea. A cracked mirror, its silvering gone smoky, hangs crooked on the peeling wall. Yet, against expectations, a faded lithograph of the Winter Palace is pinned beside it, proof that grandeur and hardship occupy adjacent inches in this city. A factory whistle wails at 6. Workers file toward red brick sheds whose saw-toothed roofs vanish in coal haze. Inside, looms clatter like castanets gone wild. Cotton dust drifts in pale vortices, coating eyebrows, tickling throats. Overhead gaslights hiss behind wire cages, their glow turning airborne fibers into swirling constellations. Pyotr No, a civilian with calloused hands and military posture guides, warp threads through steel combs. His motions are steady, almost meditative, though each hour shaves a fraction from hearing. Florature, runners, children no older than 10, dart between machines, collecting bobbins into wicker baskets. Supervisors pace with pocket watches, their polished boots tapping a cadence that hovers above loom thunder. Lunch is black bread and fish soup ladled from a communal vat. Workers squat on overturned crates near frosted windows, exhaling steam that blurs the polished domes rising across the river. Conversation stays subdued. A policeman might linger outside, notebook ready, but eyes betray thoughts of missed harvests, faraway wives, and fields now tended by younger brothers. Step into Palace Square at midday. Snow has been swept into tidy berms along guardrails. The Alexander Column towers, its rose-red granite shaft appearing almost warm against sky the color of burnished pewter. A small party of foreign visitors huddles at its base, guides whispering tales of Napoleonic triumphs. Across the square, gilded moldings on the Winter Palace shimmer beneath a cautious soon-each detail, painstaking, extravagant, and utterly removed from the cotton dust slowly whitening Pyotr's hair. Yet contrasts blur at corners. Behind the palace kitchens, servants queue beside an outbuilding door, enamel pails in hand, waiting for turnip peelings destined for household pigs. A soldier off duty leans on a rifle, exchanging a smile with a scullery maid who hides a smudge of soot under a woolen scarf, patterned in provincial reds and blacks. In the tea house on Gorokovaya Street, patrons speak in measured tones. The room is dim, samovars glow like small planets, radiating heat that fogs window panes. Along one wall, a man in a shabby frock coat pores over a newspaper, the front page still damp from the press. Another stirs sugar into glass, clicking spoon against rim in an unhurried rhythm. No one mentions politics openly, yet folded journals slip between palms, carrying serialized novels, grain prices, and faint flickers of dissent. Outside, a plainclothes agent of the third section idles beneath a gas lamp, hands clasped behind his back, eyes noting who exits with which pamphlet. His breath clouds in the cold. His notebook remains tucked for now. When dusk descends startlingly early in December, gaslights flare along Nevsky Prospect, their halos warping on icy gusts. Pyotr's ward stretches in the half-dark. Factory shifts over. Street sounds change timbre. In cramped courtyards, women scrub wooden tubs, pouring gray water that steams briefly before freezing into irregular rills along cobbles. Children huddle by basement gratings, hands spread to capture coal furnace heat wafting upward. Rodents skitter along stairwells, where plaster has fallen to reveal lath ribs. In top-floor flats, frost blooms on wallpaper roses. Ink pots must be warmed by candle flame before letters can be written. Yet city life offers small luxuries. A newspaper shared 5 ways, a slice of white bread bought with Sunday's extra kopeck, a glimpse of opera patrons alighting from carriages in silks that shimmer like thawed ice. When the Neva finally seals, enterprising vendors erect kiosks directly on its surface. Lanterns strung on poles cast golden pools across snow-packed ice, illuminating stalls that sell roasted chestnuts, cheap vodka in tin cups, and glass beads imported through northern ports. Pyotr strolls with a comrade, boot heels cracking faintly. Overhead constellations flare above the dark bulk of the Peter and Paul fortress. Cannon there will fire at noon tomorrow, as they have daily, measuring time for a city that refuses to sleep. A sleigh glides past, laden with Bolshoi theater musicians returning from rehearsal, violin cases strapped beneath bearskin rugs. The driver flicks reins, bells chiminga, fleeting harmony that fades into the hiss of skates carving the ice beyond. City density breeds invisible hazards. In drafty tenement corners, cholera whispers, creeping along water buckets, but we spare the ear's finer details. Understand only that public bathhouses bustle on Wednesday's sanitary decree day while hospital orderlies in white aprons trundle straw-lined carts across snow, bells muffled out of courtesy. Across Nevsky Prospect, a bookstore window displays translations of Marx in cautious brown bindings. Beside them, Pushkin's verses sparkle with unthreatening nostalgia. Students in worn greatcoats linger beneath gaslights, trading quotations in hushed enthusiasm. Censors comb print rooms at dawn, red pencils trailing silence through contraband lines. Yet, ideas, like river fog, slip through any gate left ajar by distraction. On Sundays, bells from St. Isaac's Cathedral roll across rooftops, deep and resonant. Factory whistles fall silent, and streets host pockets of stillness. Families stroll along the field of Mars where frost rim lights each iron railing. A street photographer sets up a box camera. Couples pose stiffly, cheeks pink in the cold. Pyotr spends an hour on a bench, sipping tea flavored with black currant jam, watching pigeons peck crumbs that sparkle with ice crystals. As darkness settles, the scent of incense drifts from open church doors. Icons gleam behind candles. Worshippers file forward to kiss glass-covered panels, their breaths painting brief halos on protective glass. In cramped apartments, grandmothers whisper prayers over bedtime bread crusts, tracing tiny crosses in salt before dipping them into cabbage soup. Faith, folk charms, and superstition entwine threads that hold souls together when stone facades, for all their majesty, cannot. Evening's hush lingers over city and countryside alike, stitched together by the distant peal of church bells that unspool along frozen roads like shimmering thread. In Imperial Russia, faith and folk belief form a lattice surrogate in places, supple in other shoulder hearts, steady through famine, cold, and the slow turning of imperial gears. Step with me now into candle-lit naves and snow-bound cottages, where saints and spirits share the same quiet air. Imagine a winter dusk in Sergei's hamlet. The wooden chapel stands small against the sky, its onion dome clad in tin that has dulled to dove-gray. A narrow door creaks open, releasing a ribbon of warmth scented with pine resin and beeswax. Villagers duck inside, stamping snow from felt boots. Lanterns flick against log walls, illuminating rows of painted icons. Christ Pantocrator, the Mother of God, St. Nicholas, the Wonder Worker. Their faces glow with tempera hues rich as ripened wheat, though varnish has cracked into fine spider webs that catch the light like frost. Vespers begin. A deacon's voice unfurls a slow, low chantapan vowels floating above a bass drone supplied by farmers whose throats remember both folk song and liturgy. Incense coils skyward, threads of frankincense and local fir mingling into a fragrance at once otherworldly and familiar. You feel its resinous sting in the back of your throat, a gentle reminder of forest hearths and freshly split logs. Candles flicker in iron stands, their flames lean in unison whenever a door sighs open. Each worshipper crosses themselves, forehead, belly, right shoulder, left fingers brushing wool coat, then pausing to kiss thumb and forefinger in a gesture practiced since childhood. The act feels automatic yet intimate, as though the motion itself braids muscle memory to soul. Return now to the Izba. In the northeast corner, the beautiful angle, always facing sunrise, hangs a smaller trio of icons. Sergei's is modest. St. George astride a jade-green dragon, the Mother of God with robes of deep carmine, and a faint, nearly rubbed away Archangel Michael. A woven towel embroidered with red geometric motifs drapes along the top, protecting the images from soot and symbolizing earthly labor offered heavenward. Before this corner, candles or tiny oil lamps burn on feast days. When a child is born, the midwife lifts the infant toward the icons, whispering, "Here is your first sunrise." When someone departs for distant barracks, family members place 3 short bows before the images, petitioning safe return. Icons, then, are both window and mirror, reflecting heaven's promises while framing daily joys and sorrows. Step outside again as dawn breaks. Across the snowy plain, the church bell tower rises like a sentinel. Bronze tongues strike with tonal layers deep bourdon, bright alto, tiny tinkling soprano, each tuned to call not only ears but marrow. Bells mark time. Matins, liturgy, angelus, funeral toll. They mark danger. Triple peals for fire, rapid strokes for flood, slow mournful knells when cholera creeps along the river. Even atheists feel the bell's vibration humming through ribs. Sound becomes touch, as present as cold or hunger. Orthodox ritual coexists with older currents. Beneath threshold planks lie shards of broken pottery protection against the domovoi, a spirit rumored to slip in after dark to tangle spinning thread or sour milk. On New Year's Eve, Daria sprinkles grain at the doorway, inviting prosperity to cross the threshold before dawn roosters chase it away. At Candlemas she lights a blessed taper and draws smoky crosses above the lintel, each stroke sealing warmth in and misfortune out. During summer harvest, villagers weave corn dollies from first-cut sheaves, storing them in lofts until snowmelt, when they are burned to ensure fertile fields. Some might scoff, yet when a crop fails, even skeptics cast a wary glance toward the ashes, wondering if a doll was forgotten. Once each spring, those who can spare the journey walk or ride to a nearby monastery famed for relics of St. Seraphim. Pilgrims ascend stone steps worn into shallow hollows by centuries of footfalls. Inside the refectory, monks ladle barley stew, bareheaded despite the chill, their silent service as resonant as any hymn. Pilgrims leave wax figures' miniature legs, arms, heart-symbolic requests for healing. Some pin lengths of ribbon to lattice screens near the saint's sarcophagus. Cloth flutters with each passing devotee, a rustling prayer that continues after lips fall silent. On the eve of Epiphany, girls gather beneath a half-waning moon, snow crunching under birch-bark snowshoes. They carry small mirrors and unlit candles to the village bathhouse, shuttered for the cold season. Inside, frost feathers the planks. Tradition prescribes lighting candles, positioning mirrors opposite one another, and peering between them to glimpse a future husband's face. Breath, fogs, hearts, race, giggles, flutterbutt, silence returns quickly, for superstition warns the bannock, a bathhouse spirit, dislikes excessive chatter. Another custom sees molten beeswax poured into water. The hardened shapes predict fortunes, a horseshoe for travel, a ring for marriage, an anchor for sorrow. Skeptics shrug it off, yet most still watch the cooling wax, with a curious achia desire to grasp the uncertain path ahead, however dimly lit. Travelers seldom venture without at least a painted tin pendant of St. Nicholas or a cotton pouch of dried St. John's wort. Horse traders slice tiny crosses on wooden yokes to keep livestock calm. Bargemen tuck miniature icons beneath deck planks, confident that painted eyes will watch river shoals where human eyes cannot. In a realm as vast as Russia, where a wrong turning may lead to snow-blanketed wilderness, spiritual signposts feel as necessary as mile markers. In universities, secular ideas ripple. Darwin translated into Russian, medical journals dissecting folk cures, statisticians mapping bell tolls to cholera spread. Yet, even doctors carry blessed water when entering fever wards, and professors light memorial candles on name days. Faith decelerates slowly, like a heavy sledge gliding to rest, until it stops. Superstition rides quietly on the runners. Great Lent looms long 7 weeks without meat, sweet butter, or cheerful dancing, but when Palm Sunday arrives, willow branches, palms do not grow here, sway above crowded naves, each fuzzy bud symbolic of dormant life waiting warmth. 10 days later, Easter night blazes. Candles amid darkened church, bells crash in unrestrained peals. Christos Voskres rings over rooftops. Even skeptics feel the thrill, a current that melts a fraction of February's chill still lingering within. When life ebbs, the priest arrives, stole packed into a small satchel, a vial of oil tucked beside a brass spoon. Icons witness final prayers. Bells toll a measured farewell. Pine boughs line the coffin's interior, mingling resin scent with beeswax and tears. Earth receives body. Soul finds onward path, believed or unknown. The churchyard soon lies blanketed in snow, each mound rounded like quiet loaves rising under linen. Though faith consoles, earthly justice still intrudes. Beyond icon corners and willow wands stand courthouse doors, prison corridors, and the long road to Siberia. We step beneath those stern arches, tracing how law, punishment, and exile shape the fate of those who cross imperial lines. A solemn hush cloaks the district courthouse, a building of pale stucco set back from the market square. Its facade is modest 2 rows of arched windows, a gable bearing the double-headed eagle. Yet within these walls, small decisions echo across vast landscapes. Let us enter quietly. Footsteps softened on oaken boards worn smooth by generations seeking mercy or bracing for sentence. Morning light slants through frosted panes, striping benches where plaintiffs and defendants wait in muted tension. The air tastes of ink and lamp oil. An iron stove ticks gently as logs settle. At the dais sits a judge in plain civilian uniform, no powdered wig, only epaulets dulled by use. Beside him, a clerk sharpens a quill and exhales a slow plume of steam each time he dips into an inkpot of dark blue-black iron gall. Cases proceed briskly. A tax arrear, a boundary dispute, a complaint against an overreaching bailiff. Testimony comes in murmurs, punctuated by respectful bows. Witnesses cross themselves before speaking, as though truth itself were a sacred relic. The judge listens, nods, pens notes that will accompany the file to provincial archives. His verdicts rarely shock. Rather, they reinforce familiar boundaries fines, additional corvée, admonishments echoed in psalm-toned cadence. Yet not all judgments end with ledger entries. When theft repeats or violence flares, sterner measures unfold. Outside, before a low palisade fence, stands a simple wooden post known as the kliuka. On market day, villagers pause mid-bargain to watch the bailiff bind a culprit's wrists, shirt stripped to reveal pale winter skin. The rod falls in measured strokes. Raz, dva, tri, free. The crowd counts silently. No jeers, only the shuffling of boots on packed snow. Punishment is communal reminder swift, limited, and soon past. The sufferer is led away, shoulders draped in coarse linen soaked with birch tar salve, pain mingling with cold until both numb. Details of wound or scream fade from collective memory faster than the lesson. Law is a frost, hard ground to tread carefully. For graver crimes counterfeiting, armed assault, seditious pamphlets, the sentence reads, to incarceration at the governor's pleasure. Convicts ride chain wagons to fortress towns, rattling across frozen rivers that gleam like pewter ribbons under pale moons. At Viatka or Perm they enter casemates of hewn stone, cells narrow as a hay cart, walls etched with initials of those long released or departed. Days, measured by chapel bells, slip into years softened only by occasional amnesty or the distant rumor of reform. Guards pace with muffled step, greatcoats brushing iron keys that clink softly, reminders of liberty's slender margin. Prison routines echo military drill. Rise at dawn, march to chapel, work at rope, walk or carding room, count off, return to pallets sprinkled with sawdust against vermin. Letters from home arrive irregularly, their edges smudged by many hands. But it is the word Sibirmak that chills even the most stoic. Exile may replace a death sentence, or follow years in chains, or fall upon political offenders whose pens pricked too near the throne. The condemned gather in a staging courtyard before dawn, fetters linked by lengths of forged iron light, enough for marching yet heavy on spirits. Priests offer last blessings. Families press bread into numb hands, crusts hardening quickly in the cold. The march east begins as muted procession. Guard columns flank prisoners, bayonets glinting faintly at sunrise. Sledges carry bundles of clothing, and the youngest children whose mothers refuse to stay behind. Each day covers 15 versts of snow-striped road, halting at wooden stockades called etepi, where straw mattresses and thin cabbage soup await. Weeks pass, the Urals rise a serrated silhouette against slate skies, then fall away, replaced by endless plain. Birch forest yields to larch, larch surrenders to open steppe dotted with sage, colored shrubs bowed by wind, frost dusts eyelashes, breath curls in smoky threads. Yet even here, life pulses. Trading posts where Cossacks bargain furs, tea caravans clatter with brass samovars, Buryat herdsmen glide across snow on reindeer sleds. Prisoners cross themselves at each milestone, praying for lenient settlement. Some will serve sentences in silver mines near Nerchinsk, others fell pines for the Lena flotilla, still others till new villages whose names never reach Western maps. The empire expands by such slow, reluctant footsteps, each exile a seed sown in distant soil. Arrive with one such party at a riverside hamlet. 20 log cabins huddled against forest, smoke rising in tentative spirals. The overseer assigns huts, axes, and quota. So many trees to fell, so much rye to sow, come thaw. Winter tests resolve. Night temperatures plummet to -40. Auroras ripple like pale banners above chimney smoke. Wolves prowl river corridors. Yet spring eventually softens the earth. Green fingers of grass emerge. Prison boundaries loosen into de facto villages. Children laugh beside thaw-swollen streams. Women plant kitchen plots of barley and sorrel. Years pass, sentence complete. Some choose return if passage money can be saved. Others remain, having stitched new routines into the Siberian horizon. They trade furs for samovars, build chapels where icons arrive by sled, carve life from a landscape as vast as doubt, as quiet as absolution. Back in St. Petersburg, ministers draft amnesty decrees on Easter Eve or Coronation Day. Lists flow outward, names inked in careful Cyrillic, traveling the same roads prisoners once trudged. In a snow-dusted outpost beyond Irkutsk, a clerk unseals a leather pouch, reads the Imperial flourish aloud. Tears freeze on beards as freedmen offer thanks beneath a sky bright with unfamiliar constellations. Some turn west at once, others linger until summer barge crews can ferry them downriver. A few glance back only once before striding toward sunrise, aware that exile has braided their identity with Siberia's vast silence. Law, in Russia, is neither blind nor consistent. Its gaze shifts with status, favor, and the mood of distant rulers. Yet beneath harshness, one detects threads of restraint, corporal punishment, brief, hangings rare, exile sometimes gentler than city squalor. The system moves slowly, like ice-grinding granite yielding from afar, but along its edges people carve niches of survival, even moments of kindness, a guard who loosens irons on blistered ankles, a clerk who mails an extra letter, a village that shares seed grain with passing convicts. Still, whispers gather in tea-houses, university dormitories, and regimental tents, talk of shorter service terms, of elected juries, of serfs who might one day own their plots. A breeze of reform, faint yet tangible, slips under courthouse doors, rustles the pages of sentence ledgers, bends candle flames beside icon corners. Soft as first thaw dripping from an icicle tip, currents of reform began to seep through Imperial Russia in the mid-19th century. One might scarcely notice at first a new schoolmaster in a distant parish, a newspaper column debating soil science. But together these quiet tremors signaled that the frozen surface of autocracy was thinning. Let us wander through lecture halls, village assemblies, and humming print rooms to sense how the empire's great winter edged toward an uneasy spring. In 1855, Alexander II ascended the throne. inheriting a realm wearied by the Crimean War's harsh lessons. Behind the palace's soaring columns he paced marble floors, aware that outdated structures creaked under modern strain. At court receptions, murmurs spread talk of railways abroad, of rifled artillery, of nations arming not with serfs but with citizens. The young Tsar listened, gaze steady, fingers tracing gilt balustrades as though weighing the empire's ornate facade against its crumbling foundations. On a gray March morning in 1861, Imperial messengers galloped across plains and forests, bearing a manifesto that would echo to the farthest Izba: serfs were free. The parchment's language was formal, studded with legal nuance, but beneath each clause beat a single promise that peasants might now own their homes, marry without consent, and seek work beyond the mere. Yet change arrived, tangled in debt. Land purchases payable and redemption payments stretched 49 years, like a mortgage on hope itself. Still, village bells pealed. Elders lifted icons in procession. Some wept, uncertain whether from gratitude or dread. Fields remained the same width, winters no warmer, but a door long bolted stood ajar. 4 years later, district councils called zemstvos convened. Picture a whitewashed schoolhouse where landowners, merchants, and newly emancipated peasants sat at the same plank table. Candles guttered in the draft while delegates debated roads, medical outposts, seed distribution. Voices rarely rose above measured courtesy. Yet each exchange nudged the empire's center of gravity slightly downward, toward those who coaxed rye from earth rather than those who dined beneath crystal chandeliers. Education flickered awake as well. Traveling Narodniki idealistic students from Petersburg arrived in villages bearing primers and chalk. Evenings found children tracing Cyrillic letters on slate boards while their parents listened near doorways, secretly shaping sounds they had once deemed unreachable. Kerosene lamps cast soft halos. Within that circle of light, aspirations stirred like moths newly emerged from winter cocoons. Rail lines spider-webbed outward. Moscow to Nizhny Novgorod, Warsaw to Brest, Moscow to Vladivostok. Iron locomotives thundered across untouched snowscapes, their whistles slicing stillness. Factories multiplied beside tracks, chimneys, breathing coal dust over once quiet rivers. Workers organized reading circles during meal breaks, discussing pages of Herzen's Kolokol smuggled amid bales of cotton. Ideas traveled faster than any troika, unimpeded by frost or checkpoint. Censorship loosened by cautious degrees. Journals like Vestnik Evropy printed essays on prison reform. Literary reviews published Tolstoy's moral ponderings. Printers set type late into the night, tiny metal letters clicking into galley frames like frost forming intricate lace on glass. Though blue-penciled lines still scarred many proofs, the river of ink now ran wider, its current harder to dam. Not all voices remained calm. In university corridors, pamphlets urged land without payment. In dark taverns, whispered slogans called for full constitutional rule. Police ears pricked, warrants sprouted, yet each arrested or exiled agitator left behind seeds already germinating. Even soldiers on parade grounds felt Tremor's comrades, swapped rumors beneath greatcoat collars, glancing toward officers with questions unspoken but visible in narrowed eyes. Meanwhile, painters of the Peredvishniki movement packed canvases onto wagons, bringing images of field, labor, and factory gloom to provincial halls. Viewers recognized their own tired postures rendered in oil, their own sunsets tinting horizon. Music, too, carried change. Mussorgsky's chords echoed folk melodies, elevating peasant themes to gilded concert stages where tuxedoed patrons sat in polite astonishment. By the 1890s, railway depots thrummed with strikers demanding shorter hours. Zemstvo delegates petitioned for nationwide representation. Students filed through snow-clogged streets, bearing banners inked hastily in dormitory attics. Change no longer whispered. It spoke still calmly in many quarters, yet increasingly firm. The vast empire, once held tight by frost, felt internal rivers cracking their banks. But revolution lies beyond tonight's horizon. Pause instead at twilight on a hillside outside a growing provincial town. Smoke curls from factory stacks, tinting the sky lavender gray. In the valley, a church bell begins vespers. Nearer by, a rail whistle replies. Two notes ancient and modern float past each other in gentle greeting, then fade into lengthening shadows. The moment hangs, delicate as hoarfrost on budding willow, hinting at seasons poised to shift. The day in Imperial Russia has drawn to a close. We woke in a frost-rimmed izba, felt the mir's woven obligations, tasted rationed rye and sour-sweet kvass. We sensed the Tsar's distant pen guiding unseen levers, endured winter's iron grip, marched with conscripts along wind-scoured roads, roamed St. Petersburg's granite canyons, whispered prayers before icons, and traced exile's long shadow east. Finally, we stood amid gathering murmurs of reforms, soft yet unstoppable. Now, settle into the quiet of your own room. The walls around you likely meet at precise angles, sealed against drafts. A switch, not a splintered match, brings light. Water waits behind a polished tap. Bread is more than measured slices. Across the gulf of time, these comforts are small marvels born from struggles like those we have just traversed. Close your eyes and picture snowflakes drifting past wooden shutters. Hear, far away, the layered toll of a bronze bell-steady, unhurried. Imagine those tones dissolving into a hushed lullaby carried on the wind. Let the cadence slow your breathing. Feel each exhale draw chill memories outward. Each inhale invite gentle warmth. History's hardships remain, etched in archival ink and weathered timber, but tonight they rest beneath a blanket of understanding. Allow gratitude to settle, soft as falling snow, over every modern ease. And if sleep finds you, may it be deep and untroubled, guarded by the quiet persistence of generations who endured, hoped, and slowly, patiently shaped their world. Good night.